Good evening, members. Hello, we've got some echoes. Testing, testing. Is that any better? We've got a bit of an echo on there somehow.
So can everyone check
Just-
that they've
just
got
a
the
second.
volume turned off?
One, two, 1, 2. Okay.
That's better.
Okay, thanks. Okay, right again. Good evening, members. And for anybody watching online, I'll introduce myself. I'm Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I'm the chair of this Overview and Scrutiny Board. Welcome to this meeting. First of all, housekeeping. I'll hand over to our Democratic Services Officer, Claire, if she read out the notice, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council's website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Apologies. I see we have an apology from Councillor Broadhead, who we expect but will be arriving a bit later. Thank you. And there are no substitute members. Members, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any item on the agenda? No, it would seem not. Thank you. Agenda item 4, confirmation of minutes and the action sheet. Members, does anybody have any comments on the meeting, the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of October? Okay, we'll take those as read. Thank you. We'll just have a quick look at the action sheet. There's only a couple of actions on here that we can sort of address here. One is the action 29, leader of the council to follow up on the issues raised regarding the homelessness performance from the dashboard. I've not seen anything from
I wanted to check with the committee whether they've seen anything. I have received something, but the leader is on annual leave at the moment, so I just need to double check with her that that's okay to circulate, and then we'll get that round to members. So if you're happy, I'll take that off for the next meeting, and then we'll send that out before the next meeting.
Thank you. And the next one was the copy of the Member Officer Relations Report to be circulated to board members. Do we have anything on that?
Everyone should have received a copy of that now.
Yeah. Number 51, the ONS Budget Working Group Scoping Report. Well, that's been done, hasn't it? So that can come off, been actioned. Forward plan to follow up on the issue raised regarding online reporting with the relevant director. We'll discuss that when we look at the forward plan. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5, public issues. Do we have any public issues?
No, Chair, we haven't received any public issues for this meeting.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 6, which is the overview of BCP consultation responses. I think there was what raised this is on the agenda was that there's been some concern about the outputs from public consultations, just a general concern, and we thought it'd be a good idea if we had a bit of a brief on, you know, why we do consultations, how they're done, what we're required to do legally, etc., and the process that we go through. So this is probably as the starting point in this debate, but I'd like to introduce the portfolio holder, Councillor Andy Martin, if you'd like to come up and introduce the paper that's been written for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this paper is going to be presented by Lisa Stutchbury. I'm just going to say a few words of introduction, if I may. Excuse me. First of all, thank you for the invitation. I think it's a very timely. It's very timely that we talk about consultation. It's obviously been front of centre and on the minds of quite a few members, and I'm sure the public as well. So it's a good opportunity, and I hope this is the beginning of a helpful and positive conversation, start of that process in terms of shaping that, continuing to shape that process. So that's the first thing I'd like to say. Secondly, I'd also like to particularly thank Councillor Walters and Councillor Aikenhead, because I know they've taken a particular interest in this and asked some pertinent and helpful questions in terms of how we do consultation and other things that we might be able to do. So again, thank you for that. And then lastly, I would also actually like to thank Lisa Stutchbury and her team. I think we can all probably agree that consultation is a bit of a thankless task sometimes, because you're always going to annoy someone, or in some cases a lot of people, because no one's ever going to be, not everyone is ever going to be entirely happy or happy at all with the outcome of a consultation. So thank you for your work, and I know it's a slog sometimes. Just a couple of points I'd like to make, really, and the first one is, it's just a personal observation. I think the consultation process these days is more challenging than ever, especially with social media. I think there's more opportunity for, shall we say, different agendas, which might not necessarily be necessarily related to the issue. Sure. Oh, all right. Okay, good. Yes, so I think it's useful to recognise the challenges of consultation these days, so I think it is a challenging sphere. The second point I would make, I think, is as we all know that consultations are not a referendum. The results must be considered alongside a whole range of other information. And I know Lisa will pick up on this later, but they will also include, in my view, the council's policies, priorities, ambitions and strategies. And I think sometimes that gets lost when people are digesting the decisions that we make out of consultation. So I think that's really important. I think something Lisa will probably pick up is the consultations that we've had recently, or the last couple of years. There have been some significant changes made as a result of consultation. So while many people think consultation, well, I just get ignored because they didn't do what I wanted them to do, actually it does make a difference, and I'm sure we've got some examples of that. And then following up for the point about this is the consultation, not a referendum, it's part of the decision-making process. And I made this point in Cabinet, and I think I quoted somebody who said something 250 years ago about your elected representatives are there to use their judgment and not sacrifice that judgment to public opinion. Public opinion is important, but ultimately we are here to make political decisions. We are here to make judgments, and we stand or fall by that at the appropriate time. So I think that's important to remember. And I think the last point I would make is that we are all part of all elected members, all 76 of us, have a part in engagement, in the engagement process, and it's up to us to help in the process of consultation in terms of communicating, particularly why decisions have been made when they don't necessarily fall within what the consultation has found. And I think that's really important. And of course, as I said at the beginning, we are never going to get everything. We're never going to please everybody. And sometimes there's a substantial body of opinion that is unhappy with what we decide. But that's politics, and politics, as we know, is all about making choices, particularly difficult choices these days. So I'll leave it there. I know you've got a packed agenda tonight. Obviously happy to answer any other questions later if members have any questions for me as opposed to Lisa. So I'll hand over to Lisa. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Lisa, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. As Councillor Martin said, I'm Lisa Stutchbury. I'm Research and Consultation Manager here at BCP Council. Is that echoey, or is that okay? That's all right. I've worked in the local area for many years managing research and consultation projects, either in local authorities or within the higher education sector. I started 20 years ago as a graduate consultation officer for Dorset County Council, and for the last 10 years, my focus has been on consultation and research within the BCP area. We're here this evening to talk about consultation. We'll talk about our current processes and where we think we can improve, but we'd really love to hear your ideas and suggestions, and we can take these away and consider as part of updating a framework for consultation. This is what we've set out as a council for our overall ambition and where we fit into the shared vision for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. Local communities shape the services that matter to them, and consultation is one of the ways in which we hope to achieve this ambition. I have a small team of officers who are passionate about this, and we want to make sure that any residents or stakeholders that are affected by any of the proposals up for consultation hear about it and have their say before any decisions made. I'm not going to repeat too much that's in the paper today, but as mentioned, when we decide to do a consultation, there are some legal requirements known as the gunning principles that we must abide by as a council. Before starting any consultation, we meet with the service lead, who's the lead for the service of the consultation we are about to design. And we discuss around the proposals that they want to consult on. At this stage, we will ensure that we are going to meet Gunning Principle 1, so that the consultation must be at a time when proposals are still at a formative stage, that no decision has been made. We'll discuss the information around the proposals in the hope to meet Gunning 2, that we provide enough information to people to be able to give a considered response to consultations. So sometimes we get comments that our consultation documents are really, really long. That's because we're trying to be as transparent as possible and put all the information out there. When they are too long, we will try and make a summary version. We'll discuss options that we're consulting on. Sometimes we'll consult on multiple options, and sometimes it will be on, we're either going to, we'll want some feedback on a specific proposal. We'll also discuss what engagement has taken place prior to consultation. It's best practice for there to be pre-consultation engagement with stakeholders or some research undertaken. This isn't always the case, and we can go straight out to consultation, but it's better to have prior engagement. Part of the process, we'll then discuss how we will consult. Specifically, will be who is going to be most impacted by these proposals on the table, and how can we make sure we reach them, and what methods are most appropriate to consult with them. These are the ways in which we promote our consultation. We don't use all of them for every consultation. We'll work hard with the comms team to decide what's most appropriate. We'll do press releases, social media. We have, I think, 58,000 followers on Facebook. The reach varies from 500 to 50,000, depending on the Facebook algorithm. So sometimes we'll do sponsored social media on Facebook, and this is where we pay to do an advert to reach those people that don't follow us on social media but live in the local area. We'll do e-newsletters. We'll always put the consultation in our e-newsletter, and we've got an engagement newsletter where people have signed up to our engagement platform to receive information about consultations. We've got a stakeholder register where we'll email organisations who have signed up to be notified of consultations. And we'll use our libraries to put advertise any posters and hard copies of consultation material. We'll sometimes use our schools. If it's a consultation around children and young people services, we'll ask our schools to promote it with us. Counsellors, we know you help us promote the consultations. If there's any ideas of what we can do to help assist you do that tonight, then so please share them. BCP council staff, 75% of council staff live in the BCP area. So as residents, they can take part in consultations, but we'll ask them to promote to the people that they meet day to day when they're doing their job. We'll sometimes have in-person roadshows, drop-in events, leaflet and letter drops. These tend to be in a specific area and they are expensive. To give you an idea, recently, I think we sent 5,500 letters about a consultation in Boscombe. That cost £5,000. So when we're choosing to do that, we need to really consider the budget we've got to do that. And posters and banners. The methods of consultation, they're in the paper. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but our main method of consultation that we use and most other local authorities use is we'll write a consultation document or information document and prepare a feedback form. I'm sorry, I've managed to skip my... For most consultations, we use an inclusive method. And what I mean by this is there are no barriers to the survey to take part. So no one has to log in or give email address or give any personal details to take part in our consultations. This is similar to other local authorities. The Poole Park consultation has highlighted we might need to weigh up this approach and consider whether we do want to put any logins or we want to collect more information. And this is what I'd like to discuss. No. So there's a mixture of approaches used by different other local authorities. Some use an open consultation process like us, whereas others will ask people to sign in, to log into a platform with their email address and set up a password. We could do either of these. Some of the points to consider, though, with anonymised consultation, so there's no barriers to taking part. Respondents are more likely to express their view freely. If respondents feel strongly about a particular topic, they could submit more than one response. There are also genuine reasons why people might want to do this. They might take part in the consultation and later think of a point, oh, I want to add that, I want to add that. So there are genuine reasons why people might take part twice in a survey. They also might, if we're doing any pilots, they might change their mind through the pilot study. In terms of considering a login of verified consultation, we could ask people to sign into our engagement platform. They would be required to provide an email address and fill in a short application form to sign up to the platform. We did do this when we first had our digital engagement platform, but then we received some comments from residents and on social media that this looked like a barrier and it looked like we weren't trying, we were putting barriers in place to getting people view. It takes anonymity away. So even if we do go through that approach, I think there's some service areas or some topics of consultation we would still want to be anonymous. One example of this is last year we did some work on the domestic abuse strategy. So when we were doing surveys, I would still think if we were to repeat that, I still think it would be appropriate to do those anonymously. People still could fill in survey responses multiple times. I don't know about anyone else in the room, but I have 4 email addresses I could use. So if someone's that motivated, I could sign up 4 times to a platform and fill in the survey 4 times if I so wished. There are benefits of asking people to log in. People only have to register once, and we have their about you information, so shorter questionnaires. It would mean shorter questionnaires in the future. One of the main benefits I see, if we have people's email addresses after the consultation and after a decision is made, we can communicate with them directly as to what has happened as a result of the consultation. That for me is probably the main benefit of having a login approach. But I'd really appreciate your thoughts tonight. You can see there's quite a bit to consider as to what our approach should be going forward. During when we're planning the consultations, we'll discuss with the service how long we should run the consultation for. Unless there's something defined in the statute, so sometimes we do statutory consultations and it sets out how long we must consult for, it is generally up to us. But for me, it's about fairness and what we are asking of the consultees to take part in this consultation. If it's quite a simple proposal, where someone only has to read like half a page or, and it's quite a simple proposal, a shorter consultation period would be adequate. If we're asking people to read longer documents, or we're asking them to attend drop-in events or meetings, then we would look to do a longer consultation period. As a general rule of thumb, we don't do anything shorter than 4 weeks. Once the consultation is completed, we will then analyse the results and we read through all the comments, we code all the literal comments. And the bigger the sample we receive, the more we can do with the results. Sometimes it will just, if we get a smaller sample, it will be just top line findings. When we've got a larger sample, we can look at the results by different people, for example, age, sex, ethnicity. But at that point, we then pass. At the end of a consultation, once we've got the report, we then pass that over to the service for them to digest and to work with their portfolio holder and other elected members as to digest and what should then happen as a result of the consultation. So as a consultation team, that's generally where our involvement stops. Gunning principle 4, this is what we must do, that the product of consultation must be conscientiously taken into account in finalising any proposals. This doesn't mean to say we have to do what the consultation tells us. It means we have to consider the results as part of the process. It's important to remember public consultation is not a referendum, but it's an opportunity to gather a range of insights, views and feedback on the proposal before any decisions are made. Consultation by its nature will only give you the views of those people who have an interest in that particular consultation. It won't give you what all your residents think. To do this, we need to do sample surveys, and you'll see some of the examples of the costs within the paper of doing such an exercise. One of the questions I got asked during the Poole Park consultation is, if it's not a referendum, why is the question written in such a way? And there has been a lot of focus since the consultation on that agree-disagree result. The reason we ask the question in such a way is that you do need to know the overall feel of the proposal from those that have responded. But the value of it is when we look beyond that question and look at who has answered, who has agreed with the proposal, who has disagreed with the proposal, and their reasons for that. And the impact of those people. So we'll look at the overall result, but we'll look at in the open-ended comments as to why they think that, what they think the impact's going to be on them. So officers and electors must consider the results of consultation within the decision-making process. The consultation's used alongside all other information. That's it in terms of, that's a whistle-stop tour of our consultation process. I've got a few slides now, which I think you'll be interested in as elected members, and which I think answer some of the questions that Councillor Walters and Councillor Aiken have asked. Back in 2020, we did a sample survey and we asked our residents how they wanted to get involved in decisions affecting the local area. What you can see here is those methods that tend to be convenient and tend to be done in your own time are the most popular. Methods where you would have to attend something in person are slightly less popular. When we asked what would encourage you to take part, if I knew what was being considered and if the council got in touch with me with the top 2 responses, we know from currently from our consultation, most of our responses are coming from people have seen it on social media or in our e-newsletters. So to me, that finding is if we can get as many people signed up to our e-newsletter system, we can make sure people know what consultations are happening. And the third one, if I get feedback on the consultations have influenced decisions. Now, this is an area I do think we can improve. I think it's fair to say the consultation programme since 2019 has been really, really busy, and the resource has really gone into planning the consultations, doing the consultations and analysing the consultations. I haven't put as much resource into feeding back to residents as to what has happened as a result. And for me, we would have to chase the services to find out what's happened. Some I know, but some I don't know. So this for me is an area I think we can improve on. I think one of the questions asked, do we learn from other authorities? Yes, the answer is yes. Whenever I am designing consultation, so the budget consultation, for example, I did a lot of research as to what other local authorities are doing. Some of our recent contact, some of the team have met with Transport for London to look at how they present in consultation results for travel surveys. They use the same engagement platform as us. I met with Surrey County Council, who have taken a more research approach alongside their consultations. They've been doing things like we do our resident survey once a year. They're doing the same sample 4 times a year. I haven't got the budget to do that, but they're really investing in the research side of it. Another thing they've done is they've contacted YouGov and they've been running polls with YouGov. So they've asked YouGov to run polls in their area, and they've got some really quick feedback. I then contacted YouGov because I thought, oh, this could be an option for us. We haven't got enough of they can't give us a robust sample in our area at the moment. There's not enough people signed up to the YouGov platform for us to have a representative sample, so it's just not an option for us at the moment. It's also expensive. We attend engagement network events and seminars, mainly through the consultation platforms that we use. We get to see what other people are doing, and we get examples of how they're consulting. I've also been asked for benchmark information around consultations. Now, this is really hard to provide because it really depends on, it's very dependent on the topic you're consulting on. It's very dependent on your population. So I know within our local area, when we used to do paper surveys, we'd get a higher response in Christchurch and Poole than we would in Bournemouth. And this tends to be because they've got bigger settled populations in Christchurch and Poole, and some of the Bournemouth population is more transient. So we've got students, for example, or we've got people that come to work for a couple of years and then move out the area. People are less likely to research finds that people are less likely to take part in local consultations if they're not committed, they're not going to stay in the local area for long. This is an example that I've pulled, and this wasn't very efficient. We searched the internet because essentially I'm looking at other councils and looking at what response rates they've got. Most councils now do a budget consultation. You'll see there that we've got 0.6% of our population responded to ours. This was based on last year, and ours was particularly high last year because if you remember, we were consulting on specific service proposals during that consultation process. So again, when I'm showing you this, I'm not comparing apples with apples. It's a bit apples and pears. We've put, what we've done is looked at our sit for nearest neighbours and just other councils we found on the internet. Looking at Hampshire and Portsmouth, they use similar methods to us when doing their budget consultation, because I thought we might be able to learn something from them. They're doing similar methods to us. Portsmouth, they included theirs in a survey that they conduct regularly with their residents. So I think they've just had their marketing team on site, and the residents of Portsmouth are used to getting this survey now. Here's something else. I'm proud of this one, actually. This was 2 years ago, and this was provided by our engagement software provider. We were in the top 10 for top performing engagement websites, and this is because we had the most visited members in 2022. This is out of approximately 100 organisations. I did phone them to ask and check it wasn't out of like 13, because that wouldn't be so great. I want to make sure we increase our response rates. They are, you know, I hear you in committees. I hear, well, that's not very much compared to our overall population. I'm passionate about making sure these people that are affected by what we consult hear, have a chance, make sure they know about the consultation, have a chance to have a say before that decision is made. But we're in difficult times when it comes to response rates. We're seeing lower response rates across the country. It's not something that's just unique to here. The Office of Statistics regulation have said in the UK and around the world, they are seeing a steady decline in people taking part in surveys. And you'll know that there's also been a decline in the turnout locally for general and local elections. So when we're looking at response rates, there is a bigger picture of engagement to consider. And finally, then, these are some movements I'd like to do in the near future. We're looking to establish a residents panel. Now, this is something that Bournemouth, Poole and Dorset have had in the past. And this is where we get we randomly recruit a representative sample of about 2,000 people to regularly ask them to take part in surveys. We would be able to use it for more qualitative work as well, some focus groups. I've already started the work on this. So when we did the library sample survey, which I think you'll be having the results, you'll see the results soon. We asked people if they'd like to join the panel, and I've got over 200 people. So it's something we're going to build up over time. We're going to update the framework for consultation. At the moment, this is a document that's really used internally. It's not very outward focused, but I'd like it to be something where we share with our residents and stakeholders, this is what consultation is, and this is what you can expect from a BCP council consultation. So any feedback you have can be fed into this new version as we start to work on that. Next year, our contract is up for the digital engagement platform. So budget dependent, we'll be procuring, I don't know whether it'll be a new site or the same site, but we'll be going through a procurement exercise. We want to improve our stakeholder mapping, working as a whole directorate with communications, but going out to speak to the services about really understanding everyone's stakeholders and what their interests are. I've said before, more feedback from consultation. I think this is quite key in building the trust, our residents' trust in the consultation and feeling that they've been listened to. And I hope, even when sometimes we cannot listen to the consultation or when it doesn't go how people want it, we'll be able to explain why. And finally, better evaluation of our consultation promotions, methods, response rates and shape. We're going to look at creating some sort of database where we map this over time to check how we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Right, we'll open it for questions now. Councillor Trent, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm particularly interested in inclusiveness in our consultation. And I've actually got a current example that I've written to officers about and copied it to the couple of portfolio holders, because we're doing a consultation on the governance review. And I was writing it out in a leaflet that I can stick through a few doors, and realised that there's no postal address for anyone to write to. All there is a QR code, which is brilliant. If you're equipped for it, it's excellent. Would link you straight through to something. There's a net link, but there's absolutely nothing for people to write in with. And, you know, I'm wondering what the policies are on that, because there's about a third of the population that they're either not connected or they don't feel confident with using those methods. So that's a third of the population that we're sort of missing out. But as I say, this is a live new thing, and I've got posters which I was going to sort of pass around, and they would go in places where people would look at it and not necessarily know, well, what do I do with it? Because I haven't got a smartphone on me, so I'm sort of wondering what the situation is on that.
Lisa, are you going to take that?
I
one?
can pick
Thank
that
you.
up. I'll look. That email hasn't made it to me, so as it's live, I'll look into what we're doing with the community governance review on paper copies. But we ask people to either return paper copies of consultations to local libraries, or we normally put the civic centre address on surveys. So I can take it. I'll take it away to have a look at what we're saying with the community governance review, because I haven't got that detail. But we would normally say, the surveys come back to us through local libraries, or people post them in.
Yeah, I will forward it on to you, because with a bit of luck, within a couple of weeks or so, there'll be 6,500 leaflets out there saying fill in this consultation. So you're getting some free advertising for the consultation, but it is incomplete really, because you know, a lot of people are going to look at a QR code. Now, what's that? What do I do with that? Or a online link, and you know, the people who are reading the bits of paper aren't necessarily going to do that. So
Okay, thank you, Councillor Trent. Councillor Northover.
Thank you. And thank you. It's really interesting to hear all about how you go about the consultations. Something that I find frustrating sometimes, and some people say to me, is that you can be doing a consultation, it's something you're quite interested in, but you can feel that you're being kind of steered. You know, maybe we want to paint this room red, and you're like, I really don't want that. And it's sort of like, do you like bright colours? And you're sort of going, oh, hang on, I'm getting sort of pushed in a way that it's going to look like I'm supporting something I really am quite passionately against. I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, and where does that come from, the service, or is it something that you have control of?
I think that's a very reasonable question, and it's one that crops up a lot, where people do say you're fitting the question to suit the answers that you're hoping to receive, and that you often hear people saying that.
So I think if we can separate out the proposal and the response form, I think sometimes it does look like we are just consulting on one option, probably in recent times because of the budget financial restraints. In terms of a response form, we would always use a Likert scale, so people can either agree or they can disagree with the proposal. So the responses are always even, and there's a neutral and don't know option.
I think it's sometimes where you don't want to say, you're not actually against colour, you know, you believe in it, you know it exists, but you don't actually want so you can just feel like you just actually can't answer. You can't really conscientiously answer a question without feeling that you're as a result supporting something that you're not for. But you know, it's nice to have play parks, and you sort of go, yeah, it's nice, but you know that this is going towards actually shutting one, but you can just feel that you're getting tangled into this. Yeah.
I think I can take that. I'll just have to take that away. I do. I mean, we hear that quite often in committees, and consider that as we get the proposal. So the proposals come from the service. I don't make up what we're consulting on, and the options come from the services that we're working with. But definitely take that on board. Thanks.
Thank you. A couple of questions that I picked up on. So once all the responses come back and you hand those results to the service, what's your engagement? What's your involvement in the process, in the analysis of the data, and in helping to construct the output from the consultation?
Sometimes we will go above and beyond and do sort of presentations and have discussions with officers, but we are, or they'll come back and ask for some clarification, but we are really just giving the analysis over to them to consider as part of a suite of evidence that they have.
Thank you. Do you think that, you know, the service directors have the skills to analyse the data in the way that someone who's an expert in consultations would have that expertise? Do you feel that they would need help in that area?
Sorry, they're not analysing. We're analysing. We're not handing over the data. We're handing over a report that is analysed. So hopefully it's written in a way that they understand the results. But if people don't, then, you know, we've got that relationship where they just come and ask. And okay.
Do you ever get the situation where the analysis you get is disagreed by the service director and they say, well, we're sorry, we can't accept this? Does that happen?
Not that I can recall, no. I don't think so.
Okay, I apologise if I'm being a bit provocative, but this is what this is about. This is what people want to understand, because I do remember distinctly the consultation that went out prior to the last budget, where people were asked about their thoughts. And there was, and Andy, I'm sure will remember well, where one of the responses was, we don't want you to cut any of the library hours. And I think there was a 75% against that particular thing happening. And of course, what happened, you know, they got cut. And there are one or two other instances as well, which I won't harp on about, because you'll think it's one of my pet things. But you know, that's the kind of thing that people are trying to understand. You know, what is behind the difference, and I think that's probably one of the key points that's resulted in us, you know, having this discussion tonight. Isla, did you want to come in? Thank you.
I think Lisa's probably just doing her service a bit of a disservice. Actually, when reports come through, when that analysis that she's done has gone to services, often they do come back and make sure that they're using or phrasing the things in the right way. So, for example, with the Pool Park consultation, we knew that was very sensitive, and there's a lot of comment either side of that debate. And actually, Lisa worked through that report with the service to make sure that the data was reflected accurately, and that analysis was reflected accurately. So I'm going to stick up for Lisa there. I think she's underselling the service that she does in terms of the consultation after the kind of consultation small c with colleagues, once she's given them the analysis.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, so I have a question about how, what we know about how the public feel, about how residents feel about our consultation. So I was having a look at the community engagement and consultation strategy from 2021 to 24, and it talks in there about a measure which was where people were asked if they felt that their views made any difference. And I wondered if you knew what had happened, because it said it was good, that was going to be measured, I think. Has that been measured, and what is the trend? Is it going up, down, or staying the same?
So when we did that, we said we were going to do an annual survey. Some of the surveys we didn't do annually because it was taken as a budget saving that year, but we have got, I think we must have 3 years of that data now. But the trajectory as it's going down. People don't feel that they can influence decisions in the local area.
I find that I do find that really interesting, because I think it's actually, in a way, that's good, because that means the reason that we've brought this to the committee is because that's the feeling we're getting, and that is matching up with the statistics. So it's a really healthy thing for us to be talking about. If it's okay, I'd just like to then go on to talk about the question you asked us, which was, what do we think about whether people should be asked to have logons or not? And this is a very interesting point to me, because I was thinking that when people talk to me about consultations and complain about it, the main things that they're talking about, firstly, are they're worried that people will cheat. And in fact, people of all different opinions seem to have this worry. I think the worry is much bigger than the actual reality of people doing it. But it is a worry that means people lack confidence. And as more things go online, there's more scope for people to worry about that. And also, the fact that people don't know what's happened afterwards, or they don't know how what they've said has been taken into account, unless they happen to come along to the meeting where it's discussed. And so I was interested to hear that having a log on would actually address both of those things, because if someone's got a log on, you know who they are. And even though you say that you can have multiple email addresses, actually, if you had a log on and it was linked to the fact you're on the electoral register, then you wouldn't be able to have multiple logons, and you could actually have a system where you knew that one person has one chance to say something. However, I do also think it's very valuable to let people say things anonymously. And so I'm going to suggest, I think you should have both. I think we should give people the choice. If they want to log in and link it to the fact they're on the electoral register, that's going to give us more rich information. It's going to help us, and it's going to mean that we can go back to them. It means we know for a fact where they live, so we can drill down that data without having to ask them those sort of questions. But at the same time, we can still allow other people, and I'm thinking even in the same survey, the choice of saying, no, actually, I don't want to log in. I want to just give my thoughts anonymously. But then we can bear in mind that they're not so secure. Basically, we can't count those ones up and say we've got 75 versus 25. But it means we've got an idea both ways. And so I think that you're coming up with some really good ideas there, that if we were to give people choices, we could solve some of the problems that we have. So that is what I would suggest. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, did you want to come back on? Thank you.
I was just going to make clarify about the electoral roll. So I've looked into whether we can use the electoral roll to verify consultations. I hadn't seen the local authority doing it before, so I assumed not. And I've checked with the head of elections, and we've read the guidance, and we don't believe we can do that. So we won't be able to check consultations against the electoral roll.
Thanks. And Andy Martin, I know that Crispin, you wanted to come in, but I think you wanted to respond. Well, there's two other people as well, so she'd come in now.
Just a couple of quick points. So Lisa was talking about the fact that there's perhaps not the communication from services back to about the what decisions have been made as a result of the consultation. I think that portfolio holders can really play a part in that communication link. I think that's the first point. The second point is this issue about falling participation in consultation. Now, obviously, that clearly seems to be a national thing, and I'm not necessarily surprised about that, because in the last few years, and I'm not making a political point here, but in the last few years, perhaps a decade or more, trust in politics, in political institutions, and the public sector has fallen. So I think I think we probably have a bit of a double whammy here. I'm not sure I'm looking at you, Lisa, because this is a political thing rather than anything for you. But you mentioned the word trust, and I think it's really key that we're probably suffering from a national decline, but also a local decline, because it doesn't take a genius to work out there are a lot of people still resentful of LGR. That position has always been the case in Christchurch. So it would be interesting to know at some point whether there's been a decline in participation in places like Christchurch, which traditionally have been quite high in terms of taking part in consultation, and also in places like Poole. So I think that's really important, and it goes to this whole issue of trust. This is a big part of trying to rebuild the trust, or trying to build trust in BCP. And the final point I would make, and I was going to ask Lisa a question on this, but again, might be a little bit too close to the knuckle, so I'm going to just make a point myself. Libraries. Lisa mentioned libraries. Obviously, I've got an interest in libraries. We all have an interest in that. And I would just like to reiterate the point, and obviously there's a library paper coming to your committee next month, to make the point that I think a huge part of libraries' role is about engaging with people and consultation. So libraries can play a key part in future consultation. And I was particularly happy that we did something in terms of a library card, a card to encourage people to take part in consultation. I think we should do more of that. But that's just a plug for libraries. But I never miss an opportunity to do that, as you know, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Before I go on to Councillor Goodall, I think people are also a bit sick to death of being asked their opinion. You buy anything online and you get a thing back. What do you think of our service? You get it from organisations. Fill in the survey. People are, it's so easy to do, and so many people are being asked constantly about this. So you sort of get a bit. Oh, I can't fill another one in. Councillor Goodall.
Thank you, Chair. Really, I declare an interest in the sense that I'm a councillor for Parkstone, and we did get quite a bashing after the gates were closed. Really, when you talk about better evaluation, it was really a case of the 66, the constant thumping of us about the 66% who voted. 66% of the people that voted to close to keep the gates open, but that's not represented. But the population of BCP is 400,000. So I just wonder, when we come to this democratic, it wasn't a democratic decision, as you pointed out. It was. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here, but we just got this. When we're evaluating statistics, I just think we need to get to the stage where we need to be very careful about how we do this, because originally, I think this whole meeting tonight is due to the fact that when we were in Environment, Place and Overview and Scrutiny, there were protesters there, and at the time, out of the woodwork came a whole pile of people who actually were very much in favour of the gates being closed, and then the protesters who were there were then actually very upset at the number of people that turned up in favour of the closure. And that gets extraordinarily difficult to deal with, because we're representing, as local representatives, we're trying to represent both sides of the issue. And indeed, we did, after the gates were closed for a few weeks, my partner and I went down the road, and we knocked on every door to find out what had happened and how people were feeling about it. Granted, these were people that were near to the park itself, but we got a lot of people who said they were happy with the result, but not with the way that the council had handled the consultation. So I'll just make that point, if I may. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodall. Councillor Hannah, I know you're online and you want to come in. Did you want to come in specifically on a point that's already been made? Otherwise, I'll go to Councillor Broadhead and bring you in after him, if that's all right. Are you there, councillor Hannah?
Sorry, yes, I'm quite happy to wait.
Okay, thank you. Okay, councillor Broadhead, thank you.
Very much, Judge. I've got two questions, if I may. First one to Lisa, which, and by the way, having worked with Lisa and her team, they do a really very good job. And the software that we've got now, the I think Engagement HQ software, as we've all seen through the various consultations, is really flexible. There's a lot of content and different ways that you can use the functionality. And I think I've been particularly impressed with things like the ability to use maps now with the consultation. It just makes things, as Lisa had actually said, more relevant. And I just wonder, Lisa, whether you have a feel now for whether the level of interest with consultations using this kind of interactive software that is more relevant is making people more interested in consultation than kind of the slightly old-fashioned paper-only approach. Granted that we need to be accessible to everyone, but I just wonder what your feel was around whether it's helped consultation, really.
Sir?
I really like our mapping tool and our ideas tool. I really enjoy how we can present information that way on a map and people can drop pins and drop comments. I think what we've tended to do is use maps alongside response forms, and I still think we get more responses through the questionnaire than we do people dropping their pins on a map. I don't know if that's because the comments are out there public, so when you make a comment on the map or when you put an idea up on they're public, so people can then go and comment on them. I don't know, but we tend to use them alongside the other methods, alongside the questionnaire tool as well, but we still get more responses. When we did the corporate plan consultation last year, we had more responses, but we had a survey, we had an ideas wall, and we had something called Our Story, and it was tell us what it's like for you living in BCP. The survey got the most responses, more people to participating. But I do think those tools help. Thank you.
Thank you, and I agree. I think it's great that we've got all of these different ways now to hear from people. So long may we find new different ways, because they are pretty impressive. Chair, the second question is to Councillor Martin. It is kind of the elephant in the room, if I may. And Councillor Martin at the beginning in his introduction quite rightly said that consultation isn't a referendum, but as we've also heard, the Gunning Principle 4 puts a duty on the results of the consultation to be taken into account when enacting a decision. And it just feels lately we've seen a successive number of decisions made where the clear results of that consultation have been ignored, whether it's unauthorised camping on the beach, the 20-mile-per-hour zones. We've heard about Poole Park Road closure, Branksome Triangle in my ward. And I just wondered, Andy, can you not see that public confidence is diminished when the clear consultation results are ignored, particularly when it happens again and again? And what are your thoughts on that? Thank you, Chair.
I would go back to my initial point and your point earlier on that, you know, these aren't referenda. We are elected to make decisions. Sometimes those decisions are not what the majority of people or a large number of people want. So I don't think it. I mean, there are lots of things that undermine confidence in public bodies. And consultation is a way of us trying to understand what the community want. But ultimately, and you must have heard what I was saying, maybe you were listening on the way in, you know, this is about what our policies are, what our strategies are, what our aims and ambitions are. And sometimes, you know, they will differ. And we all know that, you know, if you put if you ask the public, should we bring back capital punishment? Probably the majority of people would say yes, do it. Parliamentarians wouldn't. So you know, so I think it's difficult to draw that conclusion. What I would say, again, without being political, you know, you may remember the experimental traffic regulation or the Keyhole Bridge. That was a decision made by one of our former colleagues, portfolio holder, and that was not in line with what public opinion was. And the previous leader, but three now, I've lost track of how many we've had, you know, he launched the big plan consultation, the big plan idea in whenever it was, I made a note of it, in February 21. There was no consultation about what the big plan was. So again, I'm not trying to be political. I'm just saying every administration does things that don't necessarily fit in with, you know, what necessarily the public opinion appears to be. Thank you.
Yeah, go on.
If I could just come back briefly, Chair, and I think, granted, I agree with some of those points, but there is the compound effect of successive decisions when when the result has been quite clear and then decision has been taken after the event. If I could make a suggestion to try and increase that trust, and it harks back a little bit to Councillor Northover's point earlier on around things looking like a done deal. If, as Councillor Martin said, there will be results of consultations that are ignored if they do not correspond with the political administration's view or the policies, why not make that clear up front within the consultation? Because I think the real problem that trust is being diminished is when there are some fairly open questions. Do you disagree or agree with this? We've got a choice to be made on X, Y, and Z, and then the public's view is quite clear. And then after the event, say, well, thank you very much, but we've decided to go in a different direction. I just think there might be it might be more helpful to be clearer up front as part of the consultation what you're inclined to do and why, if the results don't go your way, you might disagree with them. But that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Yes, Martin.
Just a quick response. Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that in the sense that if we're laying out, you know, if any administration is laying out what it's inclined to do, that is going to probably damage the consultation process, because people are going to say, well, what's the point in taking part? Where I do think you've got a point, and again, this isn't just about this administration, it could be about any administration, it's about better communication about what your ambitions and your visions and your strategies are. I think the context around that is that's probably a better way to go. And as I say, I don't disagree with that. And maybe we can all, you know, we can all have a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring Councillor Hannah in, I must say that, you know, there are times when I think that the expression that it's not a referendum is an expression that is used a lot, and I was starting to get that feeling about it. And I think, you know, the public trust issue is a big one when it comes to a reaction to a decision that seems, in their view, to oppose the majority view expressed in a consultation. And I think you're absolutely right, Andy. It's about the communication and the way that once the decision has been made, that this is explained in perhaps more detail than it's the moment. Of course, it's always difficult to persuade somebody who's got an opposing view that their view is being countered for whatever reason, because people will say, well, you know, 75% said it was this. You know, it's very difficult to put it all. And maybe overview and scrutiny has got a bigger role to play in that, to make sure the communication is actually set out so people do understand how these decisions are made and why they might apparently seem to be counter to the majority view. So I think there's probably is some work to do there in trying to improve residents' trust in the process when, you know, there seems to have been a few that have gone apparently counter to what people want. But, you know, I take your point exactly about, you know, there's a lot of reasons that you've got to take into account, and it's not always just you like it or you don't like it. It's the finances in particular. It's a big factor in the decisions the council has to make. So, Councillor Hannah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And could I just explain that I'm coming to this partly portfolio holder for governance and good decision making on the part of the council. And in that context, we're all very much aware, as Councillor Trent has reminded us, that we have the community governance review just started. And that, to me, highlights the need for us to look at a way of getting around the anonymity aspect of consultation, because there will be a need to identify where respondents live and what validity their view has on the particular area. At the moment, we're simply inviting views, and in response to Councillor Trent's query, there is actually an address on the website to send views to, which is the head of Democratic Services at the Civic Centre. Address is in full there. But at the moment we're inviting views, we will come to the stage where we will be putting forward proposals. And those proposals may suggest new town councils covering certain areas, new parish councils covering certain areas, consulting residents on those proposals. It is critical that we know who is expressing views. As a Southbourne councillor, I will be interested to know what the views of Southbourne residents will be on whether or not there should be a town council, parish council in Southbourne. I'm not sure that I would place quite the same value on residents' views who live right at the other end of the conurbation. So we do need to address how to identify the location of residents, and we also need to address the issue of how to be sure that when a view is being expressed as a for or against, it is expressed once and once only by that particular resident. I don't have an answer to that. I think we need to explore what other councillors are doing in that area, but I think we do need to find an answer to that. The responses to not just the community governance review, but also other consultations which are area based, as there will be, as and when they come up. We need an answer to that. Could I comment as well on the question of votes or referendums? I think we generally agree that consultations are not votes or referendums. I think it's important to state that up front on whatever the return media is. If it's a form, put it at the top of the form. If it's an online response form, put that as a full page explaining it's not a vote or referendum, and that comments will be evaluated and decisions taken on that basis. And in response to Councillor Broadhead, I think he's right that there have been queries raised about why decisions have been made that have gone against what appears to be a majority view. I also think in all of the instances that he's given, there were good, rational reasons for the decisions that were taken, including legal advice that seeking to do things in a particular way, and I'm thinking of camping on the beach, the clear legal advice was it would not stand up if we attempted to do it. So there are reasons, but what I would suggest is rather than as he puts forward, setting out something in advance of the consultation, that it might be good practice for Cabinet or whichever body, as it makes a decision which goes against what seems to be a clear majority of view, that it states the rationale for doing so as a clear part of its resolution, and that then becomes part of our communications to the wider media. That might be helpful. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hannah, for those very useful comments. Right, Councillor Walters, and then following that, we've got Councillor Hadley, who's online. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for putting together this report. I had a bunch of questions written down before this, and as you've gone through, I've slowly had to delete most of them. So thank you for all the data, information you've given us. One comment. So Councillor Aikenhead mentioned it'd be good to do some that are anonymous, some that weren't. I think even if we had a login situation where someone had to log in to get access to these consultations, we could still assign some kind of token to their identity that would then allow us to anonymize the data after the fact, and then mark it beforehand saying this will be anonymous irrespective of the fact you have logged into this. So that is one way we could get around that. One thing when it comes to the budget consultation, so I've seen that Peterborough Council does something very interesting, where when they release their budget, it's almost like a combination of a consultation and a game. So it will say, you know, what services would you favour, what services wouldn't, where would you put the money, where wouldn't you put the money, and at the end it goes, oh dear, you've bankrupted the council. And it lets residents know
the difficulty of making decisions, of moving money away from certain pots to another pot. And then we'll say, okay, and also these decisions that you've made have meant that we are not meeting our statutory obligations. Maybe explain what a statutory obligation is when they get that. And we would be sued for X amount of cash. So that we can actually start to see the difficulty in making these decisions. Because I think one part of the discussions going on here and residents don't feel like they're being listened to is that, yes, we get a result a certain way and people love all of these amazing services that we do offer. But the end result is that we've still got that horrible send budget crisis going on that is limiting how much money we can push into other things and how much we can keep in certain services. Going on from what everyone said, I think we could do a much better job after the fact of saying these are the situations the council's in every single time. I know we keep saying this stuff, but there's not enough times we can say these things. So when we are following up on these things, I would love for us to see more of that information going out. Is there a way to make it so that when someone signs up for a service, whether that be Blue Badge or the myriad of different portals we have throughout the council that says, would you like to find out more? Or would you like to receive consultations? Or would you like to receive our e-news? So that we can start to build up a much larger amount of email addresses within our residents of people that would like to receive these things.
I think we'll need to touch base with customer to understand how that process works, but I think it's a really good idea.
And then some of these consultations, they cost a fair amount of money. I don't know the legality or logistics of doing so, but is there any way that we could have, one person at random in BCP will receive £200 as a result of filling in this survey, as a way of marketing it and getting more people to respond to it?
We do use incentives when we do resident surveys. When we do research, we do incentives. I'm not sure about using them for consultation. I haven't seen account. So when we do resident surveys, it's research. When we do consultation, it's slightly different, and I'm not sure about the moral grounds of actually buying paying for someone's views and not paying for other people's views. I can look into it. I don't think I've seen a council do it for consultation, but I certainly have for resident surveys.
Perfect. I think when you see these large pots of money, I think maybe like £200 for every single survey. One person gets that £200. I think money-wise shouldn't be so much of an issue. I do agree on the morality side of things, definitely, whether or not we need to look into that. But there are lots of people out there that do surveys for money. And that could be random marketing companies. It could be, and I think one thing we miss with these consultations is if you look at the results of most of them, it's I strongly disagree or I strongly agree. And we do not get that middle ground of people that say, actually, I don't care what happens here, or I don't really have a strong view about what happens in this situation. I think potentially that way we might be able to get some of them.
Yeah, Lisa, did you want to?
Just quickly, I'm hoping that the residents panel might help with that. So when we do run consultations, we'd run the open consultation like we normally do, but actually we'd also, and where I've done it before, when we didn't endorse it, we'd ask the questions to the resident panel, and quite often we would get different responses because they're not as invested in the people that are going to be affected by that consultation. So that's one way I'm hoping to do it. In terms of incentives, what we've done recently with the libraries and resident surveys, when we've done is 3 times £50 vouchers to encourage responses.
Okay, thank you. I think we've got a couple more people still. In fact, we've got 3 more speakers yet, but time is moving on, so I need to sort of push us along a little bit. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the learning really from the Keyhole Bridge and Whitecliffe is interesting, because when we did the Keyhole Bridge consultation on closing it, it was obviously with an experimental order, but we had postcodes of where people made the observations, and we also had quite detailed responses, textual responses from people, and that was really significant in the decision making to look at why people said how it affects them, what the benefits of it were. It was overturned by my successor in Council Broadhead's administration without any consultation. When we came to the second time round to Whitecliffe Gate, social media played a huge part, and we saw the exhortations to voting multiply. We were told that it was unfair and unreasonable, and I think that whole bit about accountability has become far more important in the social media age. I don't think you necessarily need to vote once. I did see again social media posts where people were saying, "I want to change my vote now. Now that I've experienced it, I actually quite like it." And so that ability to be able to, if you've got the same email address and you want to send a supplementary, to be able to do that wouldn't be beyond the wit of man. Just to comment really on Councillor Walter's observation, there is obviously the My BCP Council, so you can log on to identify yourself to interact with the council. I'm not sure that links with our consultation software, and that may be something that the teams might be able to look at, but it is quite separate at the moment, and some of that might be around GDPR and our ability to be able to use information from across multiple services. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Rice, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so with regards to trust, well, to begin with, actually, I remember when we raised this and wanted to bring it back to overview scrutiny. For me, it was more about seeing what other types of consultation are done throughout the country. So I thought we were going to be provided with more information about things, for example, like citizens' assemblies, where you're getting randomly selected people and investing in a really significant consultation process. But with regards to this information, then the closest thing to that is the residents panel. So some more information on that. You mentioned about 2,000 randomly selected, but then you mentioned that you had 200 people signed up through the libraries. If you could just clarify that, and then I've got another question.
So the aim would be to have around 2,000 people on this panel, but we're not going to be able to recruit 2,000 people straight away. We're going to have to use our sample surveys to be able to recruit to it. So it's going to build up over time.
Is it going to be randomly, like sortition, whereby you're getting a proportional representation of the society? So not people that are going into libraries and already doing surveys?
No.
Oh, okay.
So these are random. So our library, so we had an open library survey. We had a sample survey that ran alongside as well. And so the people that I've recruited to the residents panel have shown an interest through that sample survey.
But they're self-selecting?
No, that was randomly selected.
But
the
they're
sample.
Choosing to be on.
Yeah. But you still have to choose you can't
still have to
say
agree
to people,
to be on
you're on the panel. People have got to be agreed to be on the panel.
Yeah, I suppose I would like to see the invite, how that's expressed then, I suppose, just by email later. The Poverty Trust Commission, the Poverty Truth Commission, a significant piece of work that the council was involved with. They spoke about the trust and interaction between residents and the council and decision-making bodies. So one of their recommendations was participatory budgeting, which is another thing that I thought maybe would come up here as an alternative consultation method. And so I would just like to raise that was discussed and whether we're doing anything as a council to bring that to fruition. And then the other thing is the digital engagement platform. So I looked into engagement platforms back in 2019 when we were fortunate enough to have a bit of money through the Transforming Travel Fund to have invested in a digital platforms, and we ended up with the Engagement HQ. I think that yes, it brought improvements to our consultation methods, but particularly with regards to sensitive issues, it didn't have the skills to provide the consultation that would have really benefited us, and also the single sort of identifying the user and obviously when you're doing consultations, if you trial something and then come back 6 months later, you can do another quick survey. So I don't think that's an issue. But for me, ensuring that there is only one vote per person is absolutely essential. And maybe it's something that we could bring back, I don't know, or having a working party to look at the procurement of the new platform. Because that was it was a big opportunity, I thought, last time, that we didn't make the full opportunity of it.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask because we need to move on with this now because we've been going for quite a long time. Councillor Salmon.
I promise it's a quick question. It was because I have lots of questions and you've answered most of my thoughts already. But I did just want to ask, for comparison, you've talked about the cost of sample surveying, and you've given us some figures which is really helpful in the report. For comparison, what is the cost of doing an open consultation? I'm sure there's not just one number you can give, but like roughly, like.
I'm not including staff time in that, and I didn't in the sample survey. That was just the field work costs. For open consultations, it's just it's a print run, and it can be some sponsored social media. So we're talking hundreds rather than thousands, or depending on how big the document is. But the money's either spent on is staff time or a print run. I can't think what else we'd spend money on for open consultations. Sometimes postcards, that's expensive to go door to door. That's an expensive cost, but again, it varies on how many you're printing and how many you're posting to. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Trent, I know you wanted to come in, but is it a really quick one, because you have spoken once and I need to bring this to a conclusion?
Yeah, it is quite quick. First of all, regarding the Councillor Hannah's point about the website, if it's on the website, then there's a closed door to the 30% of the people that I was talking about earlier on. But I wanted to actually raise the leading type of consultations that exist. I remember the merger consultation, and that was awful. I actually ended up writing to the Secretary of State about that because I thought it was very bad. But I took it to a group of residents. I wasn't a councillor then, but I was a trusted individual and they wanted to go through it. And they looked at it and they said, well, they know what answer they want. Straight away, the whole thing, said that, you had this or it was all going to be chaos. It was almost like saying, accept this or we'll throw the puppies in the river. It was that bad. And I do think we need to avoid any kind of consultation that has that effect. Although I do quite like the idea that Councillor Walters said, that, if you had an online thing that ends up as, oops, you've gone bust sort of thing, that's better because it's interactive and you can see how what you've done adds up to it. But if you say that you've got to agree with X, Y, and Z or we'll go bust, that is kind of leading. But if you enable people to discover for themselves that it isn't conceivable. So I think I'd rather like that Peterborough idea. But, I do think that we need to make sure that any consultation isn't leading. It is difficult to do a consultation that isn't leading. And, I remember training as a door-to-door interviewer and, it's quite exacting what you have to do and not do. But, but I do think we need to make our consultations proper consultations.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we thought that this would be the starting point of a discussion about consultations. There's been a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas thrown at you tonight. And I think, the report asks us to note the report. I think actually this is the start of a journey, and I'm very mindful that the strategy paper is about to be rewritten or it's in work. Also, the consultation framework is also up for review, and I think it would be a really good opportunity for Overview Scrutiny to contribute to the development of strategy in this regard. And you've heard the wide-ranging views that members have got about this and their ideas. I'm going to hand over to Councillor Aikenhead now, who wants to take this forward.
Yes, so having listened to what people said, it's really interesting discussion. And I was thinking, is this or isn't this something for a working group? But actually, yes, I think it is. And the reason for that is because although we've had lots of good ideas here, there's also some unanswered questions, some things that, you know, I'm hearing people say we want to go a little bit further with that. And this is something that quite a lot of us were very passionate about bringing here. So I want to formally move that we set up a working group with the right timescales to support the work that's going to go into creating the new strategy, so that what we can be doing is giving input and support to that, maybe bringing some of the ideas and maybe finding out some of the other information from that. So I'll move that.
Sorry, any discussion on this, members? Yeah, Councillor Broadhead.
Just briefly, Chair, I'm happy with the principle, but are we not resource limited on the number of working groups we can have?
Yeah, we are, and that's something we'll have to discuss about when we can fit this in, when we look at our forward work plan a bit later on.
Fine.
There
Yeah,
are,
because
but you're absolutely right, we are constrained.
All I was going to say is that if there is a strategy that's kind of in the process of being drafted, if personally, I would rather receive a really early draft version of that and discuss this as a group and put some recommendations in, than give up a working group, something that we might find, you know, really meaty. But I'll defer to you in terms of putting it into the work plan. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Broadhead. Okay, any other discussion? In that case, members, all those in favour of that motion, would you like to indicate? No, it's not. Those against? Abstentions? One abstention. Thank you.
Just come in briefly.
So that motion is carried. Okay, thank you.
Just to say, if you want to set up a working group, it would be really good to get your views on exactly what it is you want to look at, because a lot has been discussed today. We circulated a key lines of inquiry to you to inform this report, but I don't think we had any input. So if we put that out to you again, and if you please send in your views at a really early stage, then we can use them to work on the scope along with officers.
Okay, thank you very much, members. So, Isla, sorry.
I'm really sorry. I know you're trying to be really clear. It's the framework that we are looking at. The strategy is not. It's not something we're looking at. We're going to just concentrate on the framework, and strategy will become an engagement strategy. So we're going to divorce the two things. So I just want to be really clear. There is something to work on. It's not the strategy. It's the specific consultation framework.
Sorry, I thought the paper actually says that both are in review.
What does framework mean? That might help us.
That's a consultation type, sorry,
I
the
think it's,
constitution type thing, isn't it?
So the community engagement side of the community engagement and consultation strategy, that has changed. My understanding is that that team has changed and they're focusing on the empowering communities work. So we need to, it's almost like it's done its lifespan, that strategy. What I was proposing is we go towards a public framework where we set out, this is what consultation is, and this is what BCP Council, what you can expect from a BCP Council consultation, and this is what we're going to do. That was all.
Okay, that's fine. I'm sure once the working group sits down, they'll get to the bottom of that and work towards the basic principle that we've agreed this evening. Thank you. So, are you all right? So now, I think the next item is likely to go on for a little while. So I think I propose a 5-minute break now rather than split, you know, during the next item. So let's just take 5 minutes. If we could be back at 25 to 8, that would be great. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you, Claire, for the biscuits. Okay. Okay, so agenda item 7, the ONS budget working groups, findings and recommendations. As you know, we've introduced a new scheme for overview and scrutiny in looking at the budget in more detail and earlier than we have before. I'll let Lindsay give the detail on that. But roughly speaking, each committee has set up its own working group, and I want to thank everybody that's participated in that. And now we have a paper that's come forward giving the recommendations from those various working groups. Now, some of the working groups have come up with recommendations for Cabinet, and some have come up with recommendations for Cabinet and their own committees. Now, in terms of the recommendations going to Cabinet, then it's for this board to look at those and decide whether those should be put forward. I wouldn't expect a huge debate on that. They've already been debated, you know, a lot by the working group. That's where the work's been done. But nevertheless, there may be some clarification from this board about those issues. In terms of any recommendations made to their own committees, I think we'll note those, but I don't think we'll have any great debate on that because those are within the wherewithal of their own committees anyway, their own, and I'm sure that those recommendations will go forward onto those committees working future working plans or future work plans. So ground rules are, you know, let's limit the debate if we can. I've got a lot to get through, and recommendations made to individual committees will be dealt with by those committees. We will record them, note them, and if anybody's got anything really burning about it and they want to comment, then please do. But you know, it is with the wherewithal for each of those committees to make its own decisions about those recommendations. So with that, I'll hand over to Lindsay, who's done a lot of work on this and putting this new sort of approach to overview and scrutiny together for the budget. And we hope it results in an improved engagement in the budgeting process. I will say that even with the amount of work that's gone on with the working groups, we're only scratching the surface of what is a very complex budget and a huge amount of issues in it. But with a limited time that I think committees have done, the working groups have done a good job in coming up with the recommendations that they have done. So with that, I'll hand over to Lindsay and she can give us a bit more of an overview on it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just give you a brief overview to set the work in context. As you know, the working groups undertook deep dive scrutiny during October in an informal setting. There were 4 working groups set up by each ONS committee. This is the formal reporting part of that process and brings transparency to the process. And as the chair says, the opportunity to consider the recommendations. A reminder that it's part of a wider programme of budget scrutiny with the aim of ensuring that the budget is inclusive of wider councillor views and that there's been an opportunity for critical friend, test and challenge through scrutiny. That element through this development stage of the budget is new, as the chair said. So welcomes views on how the process has gone as well. The topics for the scrutiny were selected by each ONS committee. A reminder again that they selected their topics on the basis of where they could have impact and where they thought were the most critical areas for the developing budget. And these were informed by budget awareness sessions delivered across all the committees in September. So all the findings are published as a supplementary to the agenda at appendices A to D. You'll see that the groups looked at a wide range of different areas through their work. And obviously, as the chair said, there's areas that will come up tonight that you wouldn't usually be discussing it within your remit at ONS board. You'll note that the findings of the working groups broadly fall into similar categories. And I would say they're split into about 3 categories of policy recommendations. So where there are suggestions for policy choices underpinning the budget, the working groups have made suggestions around those. Where there weren't choices or recommendations around policy that the groups wanted to raise, but they felt confident in the process that was being followed in developing the budget. They've communicated that. So there are recommendations around that. And the third category of recommendation is where the groups have shone a light on issues that they think need to be highlighted, or where there's further work that they've identified, whether for cabinet officers or other ONS committees. So that's the sort of recommendations that you'll be looking at. And you're asked to support the recommendations or amend them and pass them on to cabinet and ONS committees. I'll hand back over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. One further point. What I hope we can do is focus on the recommendations themselves. We don't want to revisit the whole debate about how the recommendations were structured. So it's really about the recommendations that we need to focus on. I'm going to be calling. Sorry.
Can I just raise one more thing?
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure if you said this, but just to be clear that it's not expected that there's any response to the recommendations tonight. Portfolio holders and all members have been invited to contribute to debate or and hear what is said. But there is a period of time set out in the Constitution for response to recommendations from overview and scrutiny. So just to manage expectations, that we wouldn't expect anyone here to have to provide a response here and now.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Yeah, and I was about to thank all the portfolio holders for turning up this evening. Yeah, but it's very good of you to spend the time with us this evening. But I'm sure there could be some points of clarity or whatever that could come up in the discussion. So, okay, well, we're going to kick off with the overview of the Scrutiny Board's working group, and the recommendations will be presented by Councillor Aikenhead, I believe. Thank you.
Hello. So the working group for this committee, we met twice and we had a detailed look at the two topics that were picked by this committee, parking and the residence card. So I'm going to deal with those one at a time. First of all, parking. So we had an in-depth look at the income expenditure, trends, administration, enforcement, the different costs, and from that we came up with 5 recommendations. So I'm just going to go through just quickly go through these 5 recommendations. The first one that was not agreed with by the whole working group, but was agreed with by the majority of the working group, was that we felt after hearing that the income that we get from parking charges can only be spent on transport, we still felt there was enough things that need to be done with this money that we could recommend that an inflationary increase across the parking charges would be appropriate this time. Moving on, our other recommendations, numbers 2 and 4 are recommendations about how we feel we could reduce costs so that more of that income can be spent on other things that we want to do, other priorities, rather than using them up in administering parking. Number 2 is looking at whether we can renew some of our machines to a type that are more efficient, so we can reduce our costs, and that's basically a spend to save idea. And if we can do that, that will help to save us some revenue. And number 4 was really just to explore a slightly more wider idea that maybe if there was some way people could pay for their parking in advance through something like the council website, we might not have to pay so many charges. We did notice when we were doing looking at all the data that the most expensive way to for people to pay for parking is actually cash. But we're not recommending that we stop doing that, because I think everybody realises the importance of it being accessible to everyone. But because that is quite expensive, it's really good other ways to save money. The other recommendations, number 3 and number 5, these ones are about enforcement. We recognise that perhaps there are some areas, some hotspots where people are getting away with bad parking, and that's not necessarily always being picked up. Specifically, number 5, we've separated that out because we think there is possibly some specific problems around schools. And what we're suggesting here really is that adequate budget should be there, and an effort should be made in terms of policy to try and get more officers so that we can stop bad parking from happening. So I think it would be helpful if I move those recommendations first, and then after we've voted on that, we can go on to the next one. Are you okay with that? So I'll move 5 parking recommendations. These are recommendations. These things go to the cabinet.
Okay, do you have a seconder?
Yes,
Okay.
Kate or yeah.
Councillor Salmon, thank you. Okay, members, open up for discussion. Councillor Beasley, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I was a member of the working group, and I certainly agree with our conclusions in recommendations 2, 5, and you'll note at the bottom there is an asterisk. That's actually identifying me. I was in a minority of one, quite used to that, but it was really that I was trying to test this process. And it's easy. It's almost the lazy way is just to put up your prices. And in general in business, I don't have too much trouble with that, but I think there are other things that you should be looking at as well as just putting up your prices in line with inflation. Whilst understanding that the council is trying to raise as much revenue as it possibly can from this and many other services, there are other factors. And I did talk at some length, and I won't do so tonight, unless I'm challenged, around the elasticity of demand. And I felt fairly strongly, particularly from experience over many years in Bournemouth and constructing the budget in Bournemouth, that this is part of the process that does require a lot more input, particularly from officers, to get to the conclusion. But sometimes it can reward, and it can bring out other ways of perhaps maximising income rather than just simply putting up prices. And it needs to be looked at. And if it isn't looked at, then I don't think we're doing a proper service either to the council or to the users of the car parks. So around those issues, I'm in a minority, as I've said, and there are other aspects of it. I believe, particularly in Bournemouth Town Centre, around trying to encourage as much usage as possible, both by residents and by visitors, for commercial purposes, which will enhance the flagging town centre, which is in fact pretty much on its knees in certain areas and does need all the help and support it can get for those businesses. The other point I was just going to make very quickly was around item 5 and the safety issues around parking enforcement. And whilst schools, inappropriate parking around schools is absolutely at the top of the agenda and has been for any of us who've got schools within our wards, because parents, and it is usually parents, can park very inconsiderately because it's about them and their family or their children. It does have wider implications, and we need to be demonstrating that so that people do learn what's acceptable and what isn't. But in addition to that, Chairman, one of the things we spoke about, and it affects part of my ward, particularly on the West Cliff, during those lovely summer days that we don't get very many of, is that the amount of inconsiderate parking, not just on roadsides and pavements, but on grass verges and actually public open space sometimes does require reining in, and I'm sure would be self-financing to a greater degree than it is at the moment. And that includes towing away. And if we could perhaps look at, are the benefits in terms of safety of increasing parking enforcement officers who will more than earn their keep, then I think that is something that we should be planning into the budget, and we should be working our way through to ensure that what I've just said is true, and that it can actually fulfil its purpose properly. So those were the 2 points, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beasley. I have to say I agree with you on both points. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Chairman. Unsurprisingly, I agree with Councillor Beasley and can't support point number 1 as well. I just to echo some of Councillor Beasley's reasoning, we heard at either the last overview scrutiny meeting or maybe the last but one, there in some areas have been a decline in income in some of our council car parks, and I appreciate there are probably a host of reasons around that. And we heard a little bit about the increased cost of card payments, etc., etc. But as John's pointed out, the decision to just increase car parking charges by inflation across the whole of our car parks, and that's having done with it, just isn't very strategic in my mind. And I would be much more interested in a strategy, more detailed analysis around what has been working and what hasn't been working. So I go to some car parks now, particularly actually again in the Bournemouth area, which seem a lot than they were previously because there has been some pretty dramatic rises recently. We've also seen in the last couple of years changes to the evening rates. So there are areas that no longer have an evening rate, and you can go into areas off season and there's an evening rate which is the same as a seasonal summer rate previously, and these car parks are empty. Now, it might well be that we have reached peak car park rate, and actually, as Councillor Beasley said, that elasticity has hit, and we're actually, by further increasing via inflation, potentially looking at a revenue decrease rather than an increase. But we can't make that analysis unless the analysis is actually done. So I can't support a blanket position of an inflationary increase because it just doesn't sit well with general kind of reason-based decision making. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Salmon.
So I mainly wanted to, I don't want to rehash the debate that we had at the working group, as has been stated that the majority of us were in favour of principle 1, so obviously that included me. So I think an inflationary increase seems very fair. There are other considerations that, in terms of car parking than just making it as cheap as possible. We want to encourage people into our town centres, but we don't have to encourage them in a car. There's lots of other things around that. I actually more wanted to comment on the other point that Councillor Beasley raised about civil enforcement officers. 3 was written carefully in such a way as to leave it. We did talk about, can we just ask to have more civil enforcement officers? And then we talked that through with officers, and we came up with the wording that we have in front of us, because we talked about how we currently have a lot of vacancies. We struggle to retain civil enforcement officers, and so it's actually looking at the retention and recruitment, and making sure that we have that service is working well is the key point. So I think it's kind of covered in point 3. That was my main thing.
Okay, no one else. In that case, we'll take it to the vote. Those in favour of making those recommendations to Cabinet? Okay, those against? Any abstentions or something? Okay, the motion is carried.
Chair, just for the record, that was 10 in favour and 2 against.
Yes, thank you.
So I'll just move on to our next set of recommendations. So the other topic that we were considering was the residence card. And I think the first important thing to say is that one of the first things we found out was that actually this is not going to go, the main cost of this when it's implemented is not going to be in next year's budget. But next year's budget is only going to include feasibility work for it. So it's quite important to recognise that for that reason, our recommendations are perhaps a little bit different than they would have been. And in a way, what we're really doing here is informing the policy in terms of making recommendations for what will happen in future budgets. So we've got 3 recommendations for Cabinet, and I think that they're all related in terms of wanting to make sure that there was equity and that the residence card was really fair in terms of the access to different people through our community. That was our intention, and what we discussed in terms of bringing these recommendations. So so it's fairly obvious. The first one is making sure people who are not digitally enabled can still access the card. So that would be probably by allowing them to have a physical card, whereas some people might have it on the phone. That's what we're talking through. We agreed that there should be an application process, and we felt it was important to ask for at least a small financial contribution so that it can be self-funding, but also because there was a general consensus in the working group that people will value it more if they have to pay a small amount for it rather than it being given out free like a store card. And that we thought it was really important that the charge levied for the card should be the same regardless of the format. So even though a physical card may cost more than an app on the phone, we shouldn't be charging the people with the physical card more to have it, that we should equal out that cost across everybody to make sure that everyone has the same fair chance of getting the card. But we did feel that it would be relevant to give concessions for what we call disadvantaged groups. So that would be just like the council does for a lot of the other services they provide, in that there could be a discount for people who, to make sure that everyone can afford to have the card. So I'd like to move those 3 recommendations that they go to Cabinet.
Okay. Do you have a second?
Thank you, Chairman. And my comments aren't actually particularly related to the content of the recommendations, which I suppose I'll support. But it's just at the wider point that I just think it's quite disrespectful that we put this forward. Basically, we had two working group areas that we could have looked at as part of this year's budget, and one of the areas that we're looking at we didn't know, otherwise we might have made different decisions, that has been dropped from this year's budget. So I think had we been aware that the administration wasn't planning on taking forward the residence card within this year's budget and it had been essentially kicked down the can, I think this board would have made other decisions about really important areas of the budget that we could have devoted that time to look at in a more useful way. So I'm disappointed that it's been dropped from this year's budget, but I actually think it's disrespectful because it's been a bit of a waste of our time. Whilst the recommendations are useful, they are for budgets in the future rather than some of the immediate issues that we've got. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Trent.
Thank you, Chair. I think actually it was useful to be looking at this because we're always complaining about things have happened or they've gone along the line and we've had no input into the system. This is actually putting some input at an early stage whilst it's still being looked at. I would correct one point that was made about I think the idea of the small charge for the card wasn't to make the scheme self-financing, but it was to make the physical issuing of the cards self-financing. I think we ought to be clear about that. And also a point was made, because it did have some discussion that, you know, if people pay a £5 or whatever for a card, then that's a buy-in to something, rather than just have something that, you know, just gets chucked to one side. But I think it was a useful discussion, And I hope it informs the thinking on developing the scheme, because I do think a residence card is useful, and it would be great if we can get other organisations, traders and things like that to buy into it. And I think, you know, it's worth having a bit of a wait to get that right. But no, I think it was well worth discussing. And, you know, yeah, fair enough. It isn't, well, we don't think it's in next year's budget. We don't know yet. We haven't actually seen the detailed next year's budget. But I do think it's useful for this board to have an input into things which are happening in the future, rather than just comment at the last minute when something's already sort of kicking off or something. So no, I think it was a useful exercise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Trent. Anybody else? Okay, forget that. I take Councillor Broadhead's point on that, but of course there is the. Hang on a minute, but there is an element of the cost in this year's budget, although, and I'd be interested to find out what it is, because obviously if the staff work for developing the scheme is going to go on next year, there is an element of cost there. So there will be in the budget, although maybe it won't be a major item in terms of cost, but it would be interesting to find out how much it does actually cost. But nevertheless, having said that,
just
yes,
quickly say, yes, in response to Councillor Broadhead's comments, actually, I do agree that this probably wasn't the best thing to choose, given that now we have the information that it's not going to be in the budget till future years. But at the same time, I agree that it's something we should look at in advance, but maybe not as part of the budget working group. But what I'd like to suggest is that rather than being disappointed about it, what we should do going forward is learn from this and recognise that when we come to do this process next year, when we're choosing the topics, maybe to have some way of checking whether the cabinet are minded to put that item in the agenda. And that I think if we just, this is the first time we've done this process, if we just learn from that each year, we'll be able to do it better and better.
yeah, good point. Okay, so let's go to the vote then. All those in favour of these this motion? It's unanimous. Thank you. So that's it for the overview of Scrutiny Board Working Group. Thank you very much. So now we come to the Environment and Place Overview of Scrutiny Budget Working Group. I like this, part one. So yes, Councillor Martin's going to introduce this one. Thank you. And you had Councillor Lisa Northover and Councillor Felicity Rice on your working group. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. So plenty of support in the room tonight. So we looked at, as has been mentioned, part one, climate-related inquiries, and part two, housing-related inquiries. The similarities were we had 3 sessions on these items, one on the climate and ecological emergency budget, and 2 on the housing portion of this work. Certainly, we could have done 10 times the amount of sessions. As you said, we've only just scratched the surface on this. And again, what's come of it is there's not necessarily items in here, recommendations in here that will pertain to the budget for 25-26, but we're getting ahead of work that can be done that will influence future budgets. And I think that's quite useful, especially in the sense of the climate related inquiries, because we discovered that there's no sort of overall direction. There's no cohesive plan for how we're heading towards net zero by 2030. So without having done this work, we wouldn't have obviously identified that and then be looking at recommendations that will affect future budgets. So in terms of part one, climate related inquiries, we noted as well that there's the local area energy plan that's going to be published. The LEAP report will be published in early next year. And we realise that that's the opportunity to look into what the how about all this work will be brought together into trying to create an overall plan in how to reach out in a cohesive strategy in order to contribute to net zero targets, because what we've identified is that individual departments may well be working towards net zero, but obviously, again, as a whole, it's not clear what the cohesive strategy is. So the recommendation was that Cabinet be recommended to put in place, as a matter of urgency, a corporate approach to financial decision making that would enable it to meet its net zero targets by 2030, and crucially to include a gap analysis from the work that's already been carried out, and obviously to work out what cumulative policies have been put in place over time that will obviously be adding up towards meeting our targets by 2030. And then secondly, that following receipt of that local area energy plan, that Cabinet consider a mechanism for including the full costs associated with reaching net zero by 2030 within the medium-term financial plan. Obviously, there's a little bit of risk here because we don't want to put in a whole load of money into budgets and unfunded, which would essentially bankrupt us. But we felt it was important that costs came forward that said, how would we, in order to meet this and through recommendations and through coming out through the LEAP, what costs do we actually need? What do we need to be making available in the budget in order to meet net zero by 2030? And then, then obviously recommendations 3, 4 and 5 are recommendations back to the Environment and Place ONS committee. And again, they deal around the LEAP. It's about doing a deep dive on, again, just scratching the surface. There's obviously going to be a lot of work that can come out of that local area energy plan that as a committee we'd really like to get our teeth into, and that will again influence where these working groups might go forward in terms of future budgets.
Thank you very much, Councillor Martin. Do you have a second of your move? Councillor Rice, thank you. Okay, members, do you have a debate?
Did one of us have to?
Yeah. Okay.
Listi can second it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I will propose
Yeah.
that these go to the Cabinet, yep.
Listi seconded it.
You're seconding it,
Yeah.
okay, thank you. So, debate members. Councillor Rice.
Yes, thank you for that presentation. Excellent. I just wanted to clarify one aspect on point 2 with regards to including the full costs within the medium-term financial plan. I recall that there was a discussion that would have to be sort of within any financial legal framework. So it wouldn't necessarily be documented in the same way as the money that we have, but it would allow everyone to see that this money needs to be found. Otherwise, we won't be reaching our net zero goals. But it won't be the same as sort of the ordinary medium-term financial plan.
Okay, anyone else want to speak? Councillor Broadhead.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd agree. Really good piece of work by the committee. I think Lindsay had said at the beginning, it's probably our remit in this board not to challenge too much the works that have been gone on other boards. So I'll be, happily supporting their recommendations. Notwithstanding that, I do still have some concerns about the latter point that Councillor Wright just made around the way that the recommendation is that Cabinet automatically puts the full costs associated with all of this plan into the MTFP. It kind of feels like there's a step in between that should be done as part of that process, but that's probably part of the wider climate strategy. And it seems to me that the strategy should be taken into account as part of that. But broadly speaking, I will support it in the spirit of enabling these bodies. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Rice.
I'm just wondering whether I should have checked this before it coming here, but maybe if we just change the within the medium-term financial plan alongside the medium-term financial plan, that may make it clearer.
Chairman, I mean, I'm really happy with that. I think that's a really good idea. Whether we want to set the precedent of amending other boards' recommendations or not, but then I suppose they are reporting to us directly. But I'm in your hands, Chairman.
Yeah, you moved it, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I mean, as the three of us are here, I mean, I'm happy with that. But the key thing about that point is that we have to be mindful of what our obligations are and what is going to be required of us going forward if we want to meet these targets. So the idea is by describing them, by making those costs clear, and being upfront about that, and obviously getting that information out to our residents as well and the wider public is the key thing about that recommendation. That is at the forefront of how we move forward in reaching that. So anything that keeps that in play is fine.
So are you saying that you agreed to the change, or you'd rather it stayed as it was?
No, we'll agree to a change. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Change. Okay, well, we need to vote on that change then, I think. Are we all in favour of that change? Okay. Yeah, I was a bit surprised about this statement. You know, we declared a climate emergency and the whole council voted for it. And yet we don't seem to have a plan or a financial plan that goes along with it to achieve it. I don't want to open that debate because it'll probably go on for ages. And Councillor Hadley's here, and there's some very good reasons for why we are where we are with this. But so I welcome these recommendations. So if there's no one else wants to speak on it, Councillor Hadley wants to come in. That's a surprise. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I guess, yeah. Just to reassure the committee and the public, I inherited what I inherited, but there is an officer working group that is looking at this across all of the areas. We're also looking in terms of the wider target, a partner working group, which has met several times under me, and I've been creating a dashboard, and we're looking to work with the members of the Place and Environment Overview and Scrutiny on that. And I've also been really keen to push for interim targets, because it's not just about hitting 2030, it's about doing some stuff sooner. But there are real tensions, because things like the hydrogenated vegetable oils that were introduced came at a price premium, and that went through the roof, so we had to stop. The electricity supply, we went green, that went through the roof, and we had to stop with that. So we've had some reversals, and I think we need to have a good debate. And I'd be really welcome working through that with the Overview and Scrutiny Board group in terms of the costs of going green. But the costs of not going green are also significant, because if we have to get into offsets, if government, this is a government target, we are obliged to meet as a whole public sector by 2030. And if we don't do this, not only will it cost us more money in the long term, we would actually get effectively a fine for it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hadley. Okay, so let's go to the vote then, members. All those in favour of that motion?
That's unanimous.
Unanimous? Okay, thank you very much. So part two. Housing. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this was the inquiry that we had 2 sessions on, and sort of from one extreme to the other, from where the environment one was like sort of really open-ended, and there was lots of places where we could really dig into that and have lots of discussion. This was one where we're quite satisfied that, happily the housing team were completely across this work. And so again, there wasn't any such recommendation.
You just broke up with Jessica, and nobody knows that it's your birthday tomorrow?
And so, so the recommendations to Cabinet are that, we're satisfied. We've spoken with the housing team twice on terms of temporary accommodation, especially about further questions regarding the acquisition programme that is currently ongoing, but through the majority now. We know there's potentially some issues around that about timing. Some explanations were given in terms of getting the turn around the houses, turn around the housing units in order to be actually moving people out of bed and breakfast accommodation. But we're happy that for work, what they're looking back in terms of where potential things had gone wrong over the, I say gone wrong, but essentially where lessons could be learned, that was being monitored and being fed back into their process, so that the remainder of the acquisition programme would learn from what's gone on there. And then essentially, again, it's another strategy, which would be the temporary accommodation strategy. So the work, so what's being learnt now from that process will be feeding into that, which again is something that we're asking to come back to the board, to the environment and place overview and scrutiny. And so, yeah, just noting that the work's ongoing and we're happy with the direction of travel, but also that we're concerned about the level of homelessness prevention grant. Probably nothing surprising, which is that we want more funding, we need more funding in order for those services to be met, and that we should be lobbying for that funding for the HPG to actually be meeting the level that it should be at. And then again, just where there, and obviously we're aware that for point number 3, that there was going to be the consultation item coming forward, and that there's going to be lots more work around that. And we're basically saying where, there could be more inventive or radical policy ideas, that we should be using co-production tools to explore those in terms of with residents of the conurbation, in order to get an idea whether, especially around releasing empty homes, but I think we're talking about overall, housing overall, and it can feed out obviously as the consultation work will into other areas, into how that can be utilised in order to be groundbreaking in where we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Northo?
You have to
Oh,
move
sorry.
it first.
Oh, sorry. You're going to move it? Sorry. Yeah. Councillor Rice will move. Will propose it, and Councillor Northover will second it. Okay. So, members. Okay, I've got a question. In your first recommendation, you say within the difficult political and financial position that the council is in. I'm not sure we're in a difficult political situation, are we? I don't really understand that statement there, because there's the Three Towns Alliance that got a good majority, and I really don't understand the relevance of that statement there. What's difficult politically that's making? It's a financial problem, isn't it? It's just a financial problem.
No, I don't. Yeah, I can't quite recall as other people here. No, you're correct, Chair. That really that's suitable just to be financial.
Yeah, I think it's definitely the financial issue. But unless Councillor Rice wanted to come in on that, but
I think it was more the general UK political position as opposed to the council political position. So yeah, we could remove it from this statement.
Do you want to propose?
In terms of, sorry?
Okay, I'm going to propose that we remove that word political. Yeah. You're a seconder? Councillor Northover, everyone agree? Yep. Okay, thank you. I've got another question. I don't really understand what using co-production tools to answer difficult policy questions is. What is a co-production tool? Sorry, I have no idea what it means.
So it would be something like the Citizens Survey or Citizens Assembly that's mentioned further on. So yeah, using consultation, I suppose. We've potentially, if you're wanting to clarify it further, we could just say no.
Don't worry. Okay, I understand what you're saying now. I thought it was a software or something, okay. Any other members? Councillor Rice.
yeah, no, it just means working together with the community. Co-production is what that's about, not digital.
Thank you, Councillor Rice, for that clarification. It doesn't sound like it, but Councillor Broadhead.
Yeah, just on that theme, and I appreciate some members are really keen on citizens' assembly, but it just seems to be sneaking into everything as the answer for everything. I mean, frankly, if we really want to turbocharge this, I'd like to see more resource go into experts doing things rather than setting up a commission, citizens' assembly to ask the public what they think, because we want to affect change in this area, don't we? Just one quick question. There was no mention whatsoever around the work that's done by, for instance, Seascape Homes and Properties Limited, which is over successive years really made a difference to those that find themselves in homelessness positions, and I think is largely attributable to the reduction in B&B that we've seen over a long period of time. Did the working group look at that? Because when you talked about more kind of on the edge ways of trying to innovative ways of trying to move the dial here, but there was no talk about that in particular.
I mean, we did, and I mean, we had obviously over 2 sessions quite wide ranging conversations, and in the end, our focus sort of came down towards just the well, no, I mean, there is an issue there with the homelessness prevention grant. I mean, what I think came down to was the temporary accommodation strategy. That is where we ended up looking into, and obviously that's coming back to the Environment and Place Overview and Scrutiny Committee. That will be where we'll be going into, a deeper dive about that. Again, it was just scratching the surface. I don't think we, again, these few pages probably doesn't do justice when we spoke about, but I think yeah. Okay,
Councillor Northover, you wanted to comment?
Just to say, I think we did talk about that at quite length, but I think it's reflected in that first point, which is about how assured we were when we heard about the number of things that are going on to reduce the number of people in bed and breakfast. It was really impressive, and yeah.
Councillor Aikenhead.
I just feel that I need to say that it's also, when you look at things like that, you do have to look into it quite deeply, because in my ward, Seascapes Homes were and tried to buy a property, and all the people were evicted and made homeless, and then they didn't buy it in the end. And I realise that's a problem that has been solved now, but yeah, I just think that it's a whole nother topic that probably needs looking into more carefully.
I'm not going to propose any changes, but there was another comment on recommendation 1. It says to maximise the budget and to change the direction of travel in relation to temporary accommodation. Well, actually, it is already going in the right direction. So why would you want to change it? Because it is actually reducing. So that recommendation seems to be nonsensical, actually, that part of it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, basically, we're saying officers have looked at that, and yeah, and we're assured. Yeah, so I don't think it's saying we need to change the direction of travel. We're not even saying they have to. They've explored. Yeah, exactly, and
oh, okay, they've already done it. Okay, all right.
So
okay,
we're satisfied that that has happened.
Number 1's not telling to do things.
Okay, let's go to the vote then, members. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now, is that me? Nothing can go wrong.
Sorry, just give us a moment, we'll figure it out.
It's not me, it's not here.
Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. That seems okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So it's being a bit temperamental.
Yeah. Bit like me. I'm a bit temperamental. Okay. So we now move on to the Children's Services Overview of Scrutiny Budget Working Group conclusions. Part 1, Care Growth Forecast. And we have Councillor Sharon Carr-Brown to introduce this the work from this particular group. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Perfect. Thank you.
Wonderful. So good evening, committee. Sorry I'm not in the room, but I think there's some lurgy in the room, so I'm staying away. So we covered 2 topics, as you can see from your paper. We began with the care growth forecast. And first of all, I'd like to thank my colleagues on the group and the officers who assisted us both in DEM services and in children's. So a bit of context, if you like. The group received a full briefing pack and officers engaged in the meeting openly and frankly. They were rightly keen to share the turnaround that's happened within this directorate over the last couple of years. We asked a wide range of questions that officers were able to answer, offering insight into the journey from a hot system to a service that's now stabilised and is growing in confidence and direction. Various approaches are in play to keep things on track, including things like the early help offer, which aims to keep children out of care, the keeping families together in reunification teams, and the sufficiency strategy, which ensures care provision across the market and is key to controlling costs in the medium and long term as it feeds commissioning intentions. So these are all signs of, we were assured that these are all signs of a maturing and coordinated system that's now very much looking to embed the changes. Officers reflected that they're bringing all the strands of recovery work to fruition and building stronger from there. And funding remains critical, and some of the current work is not funded past this year, and this is a risk that we recognised. A great deal of effort goes into working with independent providers, ensuring that BCP drives the market and not the other way round. The spectre of profiteering, which turned out to be incredibly prescient of headlines today, is a real one. And we heard the steps officers take to push back on unreasonable price rises or demands. There's increasing confidence to do this, which is very reassuring, but the market is limited to a handful of big providers. Regional commissioning hubs and BCP's own 3 to 5 year plan to build into its commissioning intentions not to use profiteering providers show that there's clear intent to counter this unsavoury side of the care system. Not all services are statutory either. For example, for every £1 spent in early help, we would spend £3 in statutory services further down the line if that non-statutory service were not there. So only funding statutory services can therefore be inefficient as well as detrimental to our children and families. We explored all aspects of funding, such as public health and the wider health ICS economy. CAMS and SEND funding remain a concern, but the overall picture is one of improved working relations with our health partners. For example, Dingley's Promise is joint financed with Dorset ICS. And yeah, finally, we have some recommendations, which I didn't realise have to be put to the vote, but we also made recommendations to officers and to the committee. So that's the first part.
Okay, is someone going to move that from the from our committee, our board? Yeah, Councillor Northover. Do we have a seconder?
Yes.
Councillor Aikenhead, thank you. So I'll open it up for debate, members. No questions. I've just got one if you don't mind, and that is on the confidence, the levels of confidence that we now have that the numbers are stabilising. I was interested what the background to that statement is. Are you able to expand on that at all?
It's quite simply the breadth of evidence that they presented to us, the fact that they answered every question very quickly and very, comprehensively, gave us in-depth answers. I can't remember absolute specifics that would relate to that right now, but I can tell you that we asked a lot of questions. We had a lot of data, which we interrogated as closely as we could. And we were very assured that the officers that we were speaking to had a very, very clear handle on what was going on and had done a lot of work, as I say, over the last couple of years to ensure that this system was stabilised. And a big part of that was the numbers of children coming into care and some of that prevention work that they were increasingly doing to stop the rise in numbers.
Thank you very much. Okay, if there are no other questions, members, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Okay. Thanks, Sharon. Do you want to go on to the next one?
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you. The second one that we did was home to school transport. So this discussion was just as robust and wide-ranging, but ultimately this is a statutory service, and so budgets and need have to be met. That said, there was a great deal of focus on mitigation and demand management, whilst also recognising the essential nature of this service for so many of our families. We sought reassurance around equality of access and also measures taken to ensure the market doesn't exploit the need for this service. The provider profile has changed post-pandemic, and we're now dealing with fewer, more specialist providers with a premium attached to that. Some 18 months ago, BCP tried to encourage schools to use their own minibuses where appropriate for this transport, but currently only one school does this. Its statutory status may mitigate, when I say its, I mean the service that we have to offer is a statutory service, and that may mitigate against people outside of the council stepping in. Increased inclusion in mainstream schools is the key to unlocking savings here. There's no doubt about it. For example, satellite provision and smaller providers have helped relieve pressure on places, but these are more likely to be geographically spread, thus increasing transport costs. So inclusion is the answer to so much when thinking about SEND, schools and children in general. The Directorate is thinking about how it can help incentivise inclusion, but it has relatively few levers. Could more schools work together? Is there something that can be done around parents' expectations of the service and offering different modes of transport? Do parents know what all the options are to help them, such as personal travel budgets and fuel wear and tear payments? We could do more to advertise these and help families help themselves more. For example, some of the things that they're thinking about is, helping children learn how to use different modes of transport. And I use the example that I gave of my own experience with my son of helping him navigate when he changed schools to go to college and literally traveling with him for a week so that he learnt, how to navigate public transport, how to pay, who to speak to, what to say, that sort of thing. So anyway, finally, we've suggested that our committee scrutinise the sustainability projects that are currently being worked up, which includes a new IT system that's on track to go live early next year, and the independent travel training programme, which is the sort of thing I just referenced, which is waiting for a pilot, but could hopefully also include those who've already done it when it comes to fruition, acting as mentors one day, which I have to say felt like a really big win-win for everyone involved. I hope that gives some context.
Yeah, thank you. So who would like to propose?
I'll propose the motion.
Okay, do you have a seconder? Councillor McCrow. Yeah, thanks. So members, discussion, debate?
Can I?
Yeah, please.
I'd really just like to say it's just you what an excellent piece of work you've done here, and although this is only about the budget, I do think promoting inclusion in mainstream schools has got loads of other benefits as well. And as in the past, I have actually done a bit of work as a teaching assistant in both mainstream schools supporting children with disabilities and also in special schools. And I really think this is something that would be of benefit not just to the budget, but also to the children.
100%.
Thank you. Just looking at the first recommendation, if I can now find my paper again because I've lost it. This really reflects current policy, doesn't it? About bringing as much send provision locally with new schools or provision or whatever. That is, it's a policy that's already. I guess this recommendation just reinforces that. Yeah. Okay. I do have a, if you don't mind, asked a question, and it was raised some time ago that I'm aware that the provision of transport is purely down to the needs of the child. It's not means tested at all on the parents. But I understood there was a potential that policy might change, although it would have to be a government initiative. Do you know if anybody is making representations on behalf of the council with government to implement that change?
No, I don't know the answer to that. I'm afraid you'd have to probably go to the officers for that. Yes, my understanding, so it's not currently means tested. I don't know at what level the legislation would have to change. I don't know if it's just a policy that we could introduce here or if it does require legislation. We did ask about it, it was mentioned, but it was just mentioned as one of, you know, a number of things that could happen, could change. And wasn't pursued because it's not something that was currently on the cards as I understood it, or as we understood it.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough. It's just when you see the number, it's eye-watering, isn't it? You know, it's just an incredible number. Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Chair. You raised almost exactly the point that I was going to raise. And you know, when you look at these numbers, we currently spend £14 million in BCP on this year, and it looks like we're having to make provision for another £2.5 million increase next year to provide this service. And the real difficult part is I don't think anybody will argue against the service as being really worthwhile for those children that do need it. But as you've heard from Sharon and from others, there is the system is blatantly not working, and actually there is almost it's almost quite odd that because it is a statutory service that has to be provided, it can actually disincentivize ways to try and provide in a much more cost-effective way. So I was going to raise a similar point to you, Chairman, and I'm sure it happens anyway. It probably doesn't need to be part of the formal recommendation, but I do think, and I know we continually do this, but I do think we need to reiterate once and again to government that they need to look at this policy and maybe even look at whether it is a statutory service, not because I don't think it should be, but because that is one of the barriers at the moment to stopping anybody taking any other responsibility, stakeholders, parents, others in this area as well. So just very similar point to you, because we seem to have glossed over the fact that this next year, most people in BCP would have no clue that the council provides this service anyway. They certainly wouldn't have a clue that next year this is going to cost us over £16 million. Eye-watering sums. Thank you.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, so any other members? In that case, we'll go to the vote on that. All those in favour of that motion? Thank you. Okay, that one is carried unanimous.
Thank you very much,
Okay.
Committee.
Yeah, thank you very much. So health and adult social care overview and scrutiny budget working group. It's going to be led by Councillor Patrick Canavan. Would you like to introduce it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the working group started this process really by deciding to look at the demand pressures across the system. So our first meeting was looking at where those demand pressures were, and I think it's fair to say that those demand pressures are pretty much everywhere across the service. And what we ended up deciding to do, because it is just so enormous, this area, is to concentrate on where we felt the greatest pressures were, which were twofold really. One was in long-term care, and the other really kind of related is in the reablement provisions. So in terms of the long-term care, I think everybody will be aware that this costs the council a huge amount of money, and it is largely driven by the independent sector, and the control which the council has over the market is limited. But one of the things that we discussed in some detail was the use of block booked beds. I'm always going to get that wrong tonight. But we are, or the service is using blocked booked beds now. But it was felt that when we looked at the numbers, costs of all of that, that there was probably capacity to increase that more. And one of the, I'll come on to the recommendations in a minute, but one of the things that we looked at was, is it felt that there is the capacity within the market, but by the independent providers to enable us to meet the demand that we saw on the data that we were presented with, and we got an absolutely huge amount of data around all of this, and it was generally felt that there probably was, but that it was expensive. And if you're and the service is currently going out to the market and saying, can we have X number of block booked beds? You can get them, you can source them, but the numbers vary on a month by month basis, and the costs can vary on a month by month basis, and the costs can also vary on the basis of what the needs of the individual recipient of the service are. And obviously the more complex kind of factors in person's health will increase the cost in terms of their care. So we looked at whether or not we could try and do two things. One was to influence the market by block booking more beds, but also to try and ensure that we had the provision there rather than constantly going out and having to pay the market rate for this amount of money. So that was the reason for the first recommendation, really. And we discussed at quite some length what we felt it was possible to do. And I think we were pretty cautious, really, in saying that we should initially try and reach 300. We're not at that now, Chair, without going into the exact figures. We're not at that now. So that would in itself be quite an ambitious task, but that certainly the director felt it was possible, with some planning and with some thought that we could aim quite easily to try and achieve 500 block booked beds. But of course, that's not without cost, and that one of the reasons why this recommendation is phrased in the way it is. I think the other thing to say about this and the kind of reablement element to it is, if we're trying to relieve the pressures that are in the system in terms of long-term care, and as part of the ASC transformation, one of the ways forward is to try and reduce the requirement for people to be in long-term care by creating a better reablement service and providing more provision at that level to try and support people who want to live independently, who can live independently, but need support to live independently in order to be able to do that. And that, again, is part of that. And we looked at the data around that and where that is currently provided and whether or not we could provide more provision. So I think it's probably worth just stressing that I don't believe you can see these two recommendations that talk about the budget in isolation from the work that's going on around the adult social care transformation project. you mentioned consultation earlier, Chair. The consultation on the future of the adult social care service, it went out today or yesterday, so that's now out in the public domain about what the public feel about that service. So obviously my committee will be looking very closely at that. But I don't think I can emphasise too greatly the huge amount of work that this service provides in terms of the number of people that it is trying to provide a service for. I think on the statistics that we saw, all the data that we saw, I think the service is to be commended on the way in which they are responding to these demands. It is huge. And obviously from a financial point of view, we have to continue to look at ways in which we can deliver that service in the most economical way possible without putting people at risk or worsening their personal care. So those are the recommendations, Chair. And obviously the third recommendation is just something we are tasking ourselves to do in terms of monitoring the increase in the block book beds. We're going to do that anyway because we think it's just something that we will continue to need to do. So I hope that makes some sense, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Somebody like to move that on behalf of the board?
Yeah.
Yeah, Councillor Aikenhead, a seconder. Councillor Broadhead. Okay, thank you. Open up for debate. I think Councillor Broadhead wants to speak. Thank you.
Yeah, I do, Chair. And can I just say to Councillor Canavan and the team that worked on this, what a really stellar piece of work I think they've done on this. In my view, this is, and I'm not being critical of the other budget working groups, but when I envision a deep dive into budget areas, this is kind of what I would like to see more of, not just a bit of deep analysis, but actually some problem solving. So, what I'm hearing from Councillor Canavan is that they recognise that there's budget pressures in this area. They recognise there's areas that actually we could improve if we did something a bit different. And they're proposing to Cabinet, after exploring it in a bit more detail, to try something a bit different with the hope that they can actually affect some change and actually help the budget situation as well as the service provision. I wish we kind of saw more of that. So it might well be that this doesn't work. And I think Councillor Canavan has said that, it is a bit of a test into the unknown with this block book, it is bloody difficult to say, block booking beds. Yeah, that's right. But at least it's something different that we're giving a whirl. So I'm really in support of this. And I actually think if we were going to learn any lessons from this budget setting deep dive process, it would be to try and encourage others to do a little bit more of this, come up with not just looking at the budget proposals and saying whether you agree or disagree, but actually are there ideas that we could bring to the table to actually try and make the situation better, not worse. So a great piece of work. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? In that case, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Anybody against? No? Okay, that's unanimous then. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of it. Sorry.
Can we just assess going forward?
Sure. Yeah.
So thank you, board, for looking at all of those. Just to clarify that the recommendations to Cabinet will be passed to the 10th of December Cabinet meeting, and the recommendations to the ONS committees will go into the next ONS committee as relevant. As I said, there's a period of time allowing for the implications of recommendations to Cabinet to be considered. For the recommendations that relate to budget or finances only, it's anticipated that a response on those will be provided to the February ONS board meeting within the report that will contain the final budget proposals for 25-26. For the recommendations to Cabinet that relate to non-financial matters, we will ask Cabinet members to provide a response back into the relevant ONS committees for those. So it's a little bit messy, but just so that you're aware of where all the recommendations are going to. And Chair, you did ask me to just clarify what the further steps in the budget scrutiny programme were beyond this, because this concludes the deep dive in the development stage, but you'll recall that there's a wider programme of work. I'll share this to all members afterwards, but this was in effect step 4, the feedback to the ONS board of the budget working groups. Step 5, budget workshop for all members, 22nd of November. Step 6, a further budget workshop, 22nd of January is the provisional date, but that's to be confirmed. And then, of course, you have your normal opportunities for scrutiny of the budget. 3rd of February, the budget paper will come, and then there's a cabinet and the full council meeting, which you'll be familiar with. And the final thing that I would say is that I know that the leader wrote to you to pass on her thanks for all the ONS budget working group members. So I thought that would be worth raising. Thank you.
Yeah, lovely. Yeah, and I'd like to thank you again for all the hard work you put in. It just goes to show, we've covered a fairly limited number of topics here, and there is so much more in the budget. And I think the next brief is, as you said, from the chief exec, which is on next Friday, isn't it? The 22nd is on Friday. Yeah, Mr. Richards.
Yeah, just to confirm, this Friday there's a presentation by the portfolio holder for finance, the chief exec, and myself that will outline the current financial position of the council post Chancellor's 30th of October budget announcements.
You've got me worried now. So, yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I just would encourage all members watching this broadcast, if you can make it on Friday, I think it'll be quite important for us all to understand what time it's on.
I don't know the time.
It's in the morning, isn't it?
Diary, yeah.
It is in the diary.
This Friday.
It's this Friday.
Chair, if you want
Yeah.
me to confirm, it's at 10 o'clock.
10 o'clock, yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. We'll close that item down now then, and we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the board work plan, I think. So on our next meeting, which is on I think the 9th of December. Yeah, 9th of December. Yeah, the cabinet forward plan has been updated a couple of times. Well, just once actually, been issued once, but I saw that it did actually change from the initial draft that I saw, and there's quite a lot of very important things on there. So if you don't mind, I'd like to consider it before we actually agree exactly what's on the next meeting, because we might have to do a bit of editing on this. But at the moment, there's 6 really substantial items. But if we could just look at them, maybe members have got a view as to which ones of these is the most important for us to be looking at, just to prioritise them maybe. But we've got the MTFP, which I think is something we did well. I think we've actually basically got 3 financial items on there, which I think can be accommodated more or less together. We got the MTFP, we got the Q2 budget monitoring report, and we've got the pen raw progress update as well, which relates to that. Oh, that won't be part of that particular paper, but oh yeah, there's another one, isn't there? A session, the serious cash flow issue caused by the ever increased demand for outstripping the high needs dedicated schools grant. So this is one I think you're going to be briefing on a bit. Are you on Friday, probably, Mr. Richards?
Yeah, just to confirm, clearly as part of the presentation on Friday, I will be reflecting on the content of that report. Yeah. And I think you're probably right, to take them alongside the Q2, the 25-26 developing budget update paper and the cash flow issue, all as one, as part of your overview scrutiny in December.
Okay, well, there's 3 items all rolled into one there, as you say it quickly, but it's a big subject. I'm sure it'll generate a lot of discussion. The library strategy consultation update. I know Councillor Martin is very keen for that to come in front of us, and so am I. The other thing is, as a point of principle, I do really like where officers are committed to giving us a report on time. That we actually take it up, because it would be wrong to let them down, having worked to a specific time frame. So I want to try and do all of these where we can. transformation and the centralised handling of complaints. That one, I won't say it's not important, it is important, but it will be covered actually as part of the transformation close down report, I suspect. But I think we have a
should do that on the
report.
same day.
Well, we may be able to, but I think we need to, if you don't mind, committee, I'd like to sort of take away this and discuss it with the vice chair and also democratic services and also the officer writing that report for the complaints thing, and then we can make a decision as to whether we can move it or otherwise. The Crime and Disorder Scrutiny Community Safety Partnerships an annual report, which we do have to do. We normally do it at this time of the year. Anyway, if you're happy to leave it with me and the vice chair to make some decisions on that. Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of heads nodding. Okay, so I'll do that. Yes, I did mention the pay and reward. Yeah. Well, I can mention it again. Pay and reward, of course. You know, the decision. Be interesting to see what that paper is going to say, because pay and reward, as you know, the unions have rejected it. But the overall picture is it's a rejection, and the report's coming to us as an update on the status or the progress of it. So it'd be interesting to see what that paper's got to say. Obviously, it's vitally important, and it'd be interesting to see the report, actually see what it says, what the next steps are actually going to be. So I think it's pretty important that we do look at that. Anyway, so we can have a busy meeting at the next meeting, but you know, if needs must, we might have to spend a bit longer on it. So be it. You've all read this programme. I'm just going to leave it there. We've discussed the next meeting. So you're happy to move on? I will do.
Yeah.
Okay. The briefing sessions. We had the ERP system demonstration. I have to say it was a fascinating, for those of you that saw it, it was a fascinating presentation to see just the power of the new system that's been introduced. It'd be very interesting to see how it's actually used across the directorates. I know it is in use. It's been in use for about a year now, I think. You know, and how much efficiency it really brings to the system. And one thing was clear: it's kind of still early, although it's been in service for a year. There's a lot of development, yeah, and a lot more benefit to come out of the system progressively as the system is developed. But I think at some point we probably need to be asking, you know, what is the true value from that investment? It's very difficult to put a figure on it, but you know, I think it's probably worth looking at it at some stage in the future. And then on the 3rd of December, we got a presentation from the bid teams, and there are 5 of them, and they're all coming along to give us a presentation. Please encourage your colleagues to come along and show an interest. A lot of members won't be aware of what the bid teams really do. You know, they are the main agencies for promoting our place nowadays. You know, they've got a really important role, and probably will become more important as time moves on. So yeah, please encourage your friends and colleagues to come along to it. That's, I think, all I've got to say. Any questions? In that case, members.
Can I just say very quickly? Yeah. We've already said that we'll send out a Chloe document for members to complete around the working group that was agreed earlier in the meeting. There's also a number of other items on the work plan that with dates to be allocated, and that's mainly because they haven't been scoped out yet. So if I'll send another email around to all board members with Chloe documents on for those as well. If anyone can input into those, that would be really useful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the reminder. So thank you very much, members. End of meeting.